Welcome in to the Rock Talk studio, where today I have big Allman Brother Band announcement that has been in the works for a while. I'm also going to be talking about a documentary about someone I bet you don't know, but this person is responsible for a lot of good times you had in rock and roll. And then it's Rolling Stone news, and no, it's not about the new song they just released. I'm your host, Big Rick, and I'm here every week helping you stay connected to rock history and culture through the books, the docs, and the stories and new discoveries that matter. If any artist deserves a documentary with real soul, Gregg Allman has got to be towards the top of that list. And this summer, we may finally get one. The Gregg Allman documentary that's been talked about for a long time, called Music of My Soul, has been announced that it'll be heading to theaters coming this summer. No streaming announced just yet, but I'm sure it's coming after that theater run, and I am really fired up to talk about this today because the Allman Brothers Band, in my top 5 bands of all time, easily. It was the second band I ever saw live, the first being Kiss when I was 14 years old, but Allman Brothers came in second, and then it was Yes, and then it was ZZ Top. What a great run that kicked it all off, and I think that's what really lit the fuse that is obviously still burning here. But what stands out immediately about this doc is the kind of material they are saying the film is built around. They're talking about rare archival footage, never before seen interviews, and it sounds like we're going to get something that goes beyond the usual career highlights. His wife has come out talking about how she participated in it. Devin Allman, his son, is speaking about it. High hopes with this one. And what makes it especially interesting to me is that the doc suggests it wants to look at Gregg not just as a musician, but as a larger cultural figure. Gregg was one of the most soulful, battered, and essential figures in American rock. There's a lot of story here to tell. It'll be interesting to see how they'll be able to pull it off. What I'll be watching for is whether the film really captures Gregg the artist, not just Gregg the survivor. To me, Gregg Allman, hands down, best white blues rock and roll singer of all time. No contest. I was racking my brain, like, who could challenge Gregg Allman for the best white blues singer? I mean, Paul Rodgers, maybe early Robert Plant. No one touches Gregg, bottom line. There's also mention that the film is going to highlight how Gregg and the band rejected racial divisions of the American South at the time and how they worked with a black musician in their band, J-Mo, the wonderful J-Mo, the drummer, when, there weren't a lot of that happening in rock and roll. Okay, so it sounds like there's a possibility of exploring, black musical roots behind the Allman Brothers bands, which is very important, the blues, the soul, and gospel and R&B traditions that run through Gregg's voice and through the music. I think that would be a really cool angle. Will it show us the singer in full? Not just the man shaped by tragedy and addiction and fame and fallout, but the actual artist at the center of it all? I really hope so. This is a great opportunity to put that spotlight on the amazing talent and person, Gregg Allman. We shall see this summer. I know I will probably be one of the first in line at my local theater. From the Allman Brothers to the Rolling Stones now, this is a fun show. There's a new Rolling Stones book that just came out. It's called The Rolling Stones Biography. And what makes this one stand out is it's really not the material covered here. The Stones story has been told, and there's a lot of documentaries out about the Stones. There's a couple that came out recently. There's one about Brian Jones and the Stones, and there's one that I highly suggest. It's kind of a little sleeper. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's called Catching Fire, the story of Anita Pallenberg. That shows a lot about what is talked about in this book, especially in the early stages of their career. A lot of great home video was used for this documentary, Catching Fire, of her time with Keith. Really cool documentary if you get a chance to check that out. But back to the book, it's really, again, not about the material that got me hyped about this, but it's the way that it was covered. The book is written by famous rock writer Bob Spitz, who brings with him a resume that includes 2 great rock and roll biographies, the Beatle biography that he wrote that came out in 2005, and the more recently really good Led Zeppelin biography that came out in 2021. I'm about halfway through the Stones book, a little over halfway through. Next week, I'm going to give you the inside scoop. I'll give you more details. I'm going to do a little book review on it and talk about the new Stone book that just came out today. We'll find out next week if it can sit next to those two great other biographies that Spitz wrote. So as I mentioned, I was about a little over halfway through the book, where the part where Brian Jones passes away and Mick Taylor comes in and joins the band for the first time. And that sent me down a completely different rock and roll rabbit hole because of the last book I read, and that was Melissa Oftemauer, the bass player for Hole and Smashing Pumpkins, her memoir, Even the Good Girls Cry. So it got me thinking, how many artists in rock and roll history have had made their first appearance with a band under unbelievable pressure? So with like Oftemauer, Hole postponed their tour after their bassist died in 94, and Melissa was hired shortly before the band resumed live shows, and her first performance with Hole was at the 94 Reading Festival, and this was right after Kurt Cobain's death. Courtney comes out and starts screaming at the audience, and Oftemauer talks about it in their book. She just couldn't believe where she was and what she was about to deal with, especially when Courtney's starting to yell at the audience about, I know how you feel. You don't think I know how you feel, talking about Kurt's death. Amazing first time playing rock and roll moment. What about Brian Johnson? In a similar situation, Bon Scott died February 1980, and then Brian Johnson made its first onstage appearance with AC/DC in June 29th in 1980 in Belgium, and that began the Back in Black era, and that was under tremendous pressure to live up to the shadow of Bon Scott. But look what Brian Johnson did. He took that band on his shoulders and became legend himself. Another really cool baptism by fire rock and roll moment. And then here's a sneaky one. I always like to throw a little wild card in there. Matt Sorum. Guns N' Roses replaces Steven Adler, the original drummer, in 90 with Matt Sorum. That was during the Use Your Illusion era. First show he plays with the band, Rock in Rio, in front of a sold-out show, 140, they're saying maybe even 180,000 people were in the audience, and the performance was going to be on television. And there's a lot of ands in this one. He also never rehearsed with Axl Rose before the show, and he didn't have a set list going into the show. This tale and many other wild stories are in his memoir, Double Talking Jive, if you want to check it out. But that is a crazy rock and roll baptism by fire, Matt Sorum and Guns N' Roses. Some good rock and roll stories in that memoir, just like this next one, which I can't wait to talk about, a documentary filled with legendary moments. Okay, I got ahead of myself a little bit there. There's more Stones news that I forgot to tell you about. You're going to like it. I have a chance to give away 2 copies of that new Rolling Stones biography, 2 copies of the Bob Spitz book, and I'm going to be giving it away in a couple of weeks. Here's how you get a chance to win this book. All you have to do is just sign up for my free newsletter. It's called the Rock Talk Studio Blast. It comes out on the last Friday of each month, and it takes this show and just takes it to the next level. All about book buzz, doc news, cultural events, new happenings, everything you want to know about rock and roll to keep you up to date. It's a quick read. I always try to keep it under about 5 or 6 minutes, just like the show. You just get a really good recap of what's happening and keeps you on top of all the cool stuff that's out there. Here's an easy way to sign up. Just go to the show notes. The show notes are the notes in this podcast. So wherever you're listening on a podcast directory, there's always a little note about the show, gives you a little description of the show. And in there, there's going to be a link to my Substack account. Just go ahead and click that. Again, it's a free subscription, and that will enter you into all these great book giveaways that I do. It's something I'm really into because I can provide something to you, the listening audience, who provides so much to me, so much great support, so much great follow, so much great encouragement. So I get a chance to give away books. I just gave away a really cool Rush 2112 book. I gave away a Kiss book this year. I gave away an Oasis book recently. And there's going to be a really cool book coming up after this Rolling Stone book. So I've got another one lined up. But for a chance to win this one, the Rolling Stone biography by Bob Spitz, go to those show notes, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll hook you up. All right, let's go out with a bang on this show and talk about this really, really cool documentary. This documentary is pure rock and roll history about someone in rock and roll that you might not have heard of unless possibly you grew up back east. He's not a rock star. He's not a musician. He's not a side musician or session player. He didn't run a big record label. He is a legendary New York concert promoter. And if you don't know him, you might know him from a concert ticket stub or a flyer that always led with Ron Delsner Presents, because Ron Delsner presented major rock and roll concerts in and throughout the East Coast from the 60s up until almost today. And this documentary does a tremendous job of telling me who this character Ron Delsner is. He's in his 80s now, and he's just as vibrant as he was when he was young. This guy is straight New York. He's got the accent. He's got the attitude. He grew up in New York City. He's funny. He's witty. He's so energetic for his age, and he loves music. And it comes through in this as I follow him around, going to shows, setting up shows in his office, in his house, with his wife, with his family, and then going back and looking at his career. It's amazing. His daughter says that in his 80s, he would go to 2-3 shows a night. He just couldn't stop doing this thing that he loved, and it really comes through in this documentary. He has so much memorabilia, and he goes through some pieces in this. This guy is a museum of stuff that he's collected and saved, because he admits he's kind of a hoarder, and he saved everything, and he has stashed away just rock and roll gold. And what's in this documentary is rock and roll gold. Tremendous participation from the East Coast Rock and Roll Squad. You got Bruce and Steven Van Zandt sitting on a couch together, talking about Delsner and the shows that he produced and how he helped them bring their career up. Patti Smith and Lenny Kaine are talking about times with Delsner. Bette Midler's in here. Bon Jovi's in here. Paul Simon, there's a really cool moment in the doc where he talks about how Delsner basically brought Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel back together with that tremendous Central Park concert in New York City that he put together. Great footage of that too. And there's also really great footage of David Bowie performance at Carnegie Hall. He talked the people into Carnegie Hall into having David Bowie come in the height of Ziggy Stardust. This is a fabulous documentary. It's gritty. It's not high production. It's kind of a low-grade presentation, but it's done so well, and it works really well because of that New York City vibe you wanted to get. And you also get a really, really good understanding of this legend, Ron Delsner. I will never forget this name of this amazing guy. I saw a few Ron Delsner Presents shows when I was growing up back east, but now after this documentary, I will always bow down to this amazing cat. Long live Ron Delsner. Check out this fantastic documentary. I think I paid $4.99 for it on Prime. What a steal. Ron Delsner Presents. Okay, time to tear it down, pack it up, and head on down the road this week on the Rock Talk Studio. Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'll see you next time for more of the artifacts, myths, stories, and moments that define and celebrate the art form we know and love as rock and roll.